These are meagre amounts that are supposed to sustain a family. The mortality rate is horrendous. Every day of 10,000 people, 2 will die because of hunger. When aid does come, there's a scramble of people running towards pallets dropped from planes or fighting to get on the back of lorries to grab a bag of flour. This man is 75 years old. He is painfully thin.
Before the war, I weighed around 70 kilos. Now, because of malnutrition, my weight has dropped to just 40. I suffered both a stroke and a heart attack. They had to put in a stent to help me recover. I thank God my organs are still functioning.
The Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, dismissed the report as an outright lie and said the problems in Gaza are caused by Hamas. For many Israelis, there is limited sympathy for Gaza. This sign has just gone up in Jerusalem's Old City. You lived in Gaza? Oh, you and here we meet a father and daughter who lived in an Israeli settlement inside Gaza until it was closed 20 years ago. They both think Gazans should be evicted and that Israel should take over the territory.
If someone was trying to kill your wife or kidnap your child from the home, you're thinking about if we're hungry or not?
Others, less strident, but still dubious that Israel has caused a famine.
I think Israel cares. I think Israelis in general care. And I don't find any other country that's fighting a war and trying to help them at the same time, the people.
The IPC report says death, starvation and deprivation are evident on the streets of Gaza. But on the outskirts of Gaza City, the Israeli military is slowly massing forces, ready to encircle this cursed place. If a ceasefire is not agreed, then this city of starving people will be attacked once more. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Jerusalem.
Ghislaine Maxwell has told the US Justice Department that she never saw Donald Trump behave inappropriately while in the company of Jeffrey Epstein, and she says she's not aware of any incriminating client list. The comments were made in interviews last month, with the transcripts and audio recordings released earlier on this evening.
I certainly never witnessed the president in any of, I don't recall ever seeing him in his house, for instance. I actually never saw the president in any type of massage setting. I never witnessed the president in any inappropriate setting in any way. The president was never inappropriate with anybody. In the times that I was with him, he was a gentleman in all respects.
Let's bring in our US correspondent Martha Kellner, who is in Los Angeles. Martha, there have been a clamour for weeks and months for more of the Epstein files to be released. But hearing that snippet there, Donald Trump won't be too upset that they have been.
No, and as you say, Matt, there has been a clamour for this interview to be released, an interview that Ghislaine Maxwell did with Todd Blanche, who is the Deputy Attorney General, so the government's second most senior lawyer. 6 hours worth of audio recorded over the course of 2 days. This interview took place in Florida, which is not far from the prison where she was serving a 20-year sentence for helping Jeffrey Epstein abuse underage girls, although she has since controversially been moved to a lower security prison in Texas. Now, Todd Blanche posted these audio files on social media and said he was sharing them in the interests, in his words, of transparency. And the Trump administration wants to be seen to be being transparent over this issue amid calls for the release of the so-called Jeffrey Epstein files and a renewed spotlight on the president's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. As you say, though, he won't be that upset with the release of this audio because on the face of it, it's very good news for him. Ghislaine Maxwell suggesting she never witnessed the president being inappropriate with young girls. She also said that no client list of Jeffrey Epstein's exists. She was asked about Jeffrey Epstein's death. He died in his prison cell in August 2019. His death was ruled suicide by the FBI, but it is the subject of lots of conspiracy theories, lots of people believing he was murdered as some sort of wider cover-up. This is what Ghislaine Maxwell had to say about Epstein's death.
So you think he did not die by suicide, given all the things we just talked about?
I do not believe he died by suicide, no.
And do you believe that, do you have any speculation or view of who killed him?
No, I don't.
Ghislaine Maxwell was granted limited immunity for that interview, meaning that nothing that she said can be used against her in a court of law. Her lawyer, David Marcus, saying that she did not refuse to respond and did not dodge any question. Ghislaine Maxwell, though, appealing for Donald Trump to pardon her. And, you know, even though this interview has been released, it won't stop those calls growing ever louder, including from Donald Trump's own Republican Party, for the release of the full Jeffrey Epstein files.
Martha in LA, thank you very much indeed. Here, the government's taken the first step in appealing a court's decision to remove asylum seekers from the Bell Hotel in Epping. The Home Office is seeking permission to intervene in the case brought by Epping Council in Essex, saying such closures must be carried out in an ordered way. It comes as analysis by Sky News has found that 18 other councils are actively pursuing or considering similar legal challenges, as Shingi Mararike explains.
In the shadow of a hotel housing asylum seekers in Leeds, anti-immigration protesters on one side and counter-protesters on the other. Groups separated by a road and a fault line that only feels like it's growing. There were similar scenes in Portsmouth and Orpington on the outskirts of London, where there were clashes and tension. That fervour, fueled by a major High Court ruling this week, stopping the government from housing asylum seekers at the Bell Hotel in Epping, which has been the scene of multiple arrests and protests. The government says it will appeal the decision.
This government will close all asylum hotels and we will clear up the mess that we inherited from the previous government. We've made a commitment that we will close all of the asylum hotels by the end of this Parliament, but we need to do that in a managed and ordered way, and that's why we'll appeal this decision.
And today, more migrants crossing the Channel, adding to the asylum backlog the government says it's doing its best to tackle. Aware of those optics, the leader of Reform UK, who weighed in today on the government's appeal against the court decision in Epping.
Ask yourself a question. Whose side is this government on? Is it on your side, or is it on the side of young, undocumented males coming into Britain, too many of whom, frankly, assault our young women?
This isn't just an issue in the political arena, it's one on the ground as well. Here in Leeds, the two sides are just meters apart, but it feels like they couldn't be further away. The only thing they have in common is the fact that they're both extremely passionate about their positions on this issue.
I couldn't go to the job centre tomorrow and say, I've got nowhere to live, can you put me in a hotel? And I want 3 meals a day and 70 quid a week. They wouldn't give me it. I'd have to fend for myself, but if I came on a boat, I'd get it all, and it's unfair.
If they pass the vetting system, they're allowed here. What's wrong with that? If they don't pass it, they have to go home.
At the moment, the situation in Britain is terrifying. The prevailing narrative, the prevailing story is that the problem in our society is refugees, some of the most vulnerable people in our society. That's from all the major politicians, that's coming out of the media, and that's breeding the kind of violence that we're seeing outside of hotels across the country.
There are protests planned this weekend and in the weeks to come, with court action planned by more councils too, meaning this summer of debate and disquiet will only continue. Shingi Mararike, Sky News in Leeds.
Back to the US now. The FBI has raided the home of Trump advisor turned critic John Bolton today. He served as the president's top national security advisor for 17 months, but was forced out of the role in 2019. The search was reportedly part of a national security investigation related to classified records. Here's our US correspondent Mark Stone.
He has been a familiar face in American politics for many years, the one-time national security advisor for Donald Trump, John Bolton. The two spectacularly fell out in 2019. He was fired, wrote a book, and has been a willing critic ever since.
He doesn't prepare because he doesn't think he needs to.
He doesn't do strategy.
He's not smart enough to be an authoritarian.
And last year on Sky's election night show, he predicted retribution.
Everything to Trump is personal. And I think he's very serious when he says that he wants to use the Justice Department in the way he says it was used against him.
And the FBI arrived early on Friday morning, 7 a.m. at his suburban Maryland home. They had a warrant and went straight in. It's thought he'd already left for his DC office, and there was nothing subtle about this raid. Boxes taken in, the search, we were told, was for classified documents and potential breaches of national security. Well, the FBI agents have been inside his home now for around about 4 hours, and there's been a little bit of coming and going. You can see their vehicles there. One four-wheel drive has now been backed up against the garage. We've seen them too taking evidence boxes inside. It's not clear at this stage what, if anything, they plan to seize. But as you can see over the road in this corner of Bethesda, Maryland, it's causing quite the commotion. Just a couple of protesters, but with a tagline they represent many across the country, not aligned necessarily to Bolton's politics, but of the view that Trump is the danger. Get out, move! At his downtown DC office, another raid and boxes taken away. It's all believed to be related to his book. The Room Where It Happened is a no-holds-barred takedown of Trump, a book Trump tried to block from publication in 2020. There was an investigation back then about whether Bolton had breached national security in writing it. It was dropped when Biden became president. What's not clear is what new evidence has prompted the investigation to be reopened and the warrant issued. The president says he was given no prior knowledge of the raids.
I don't know about it. I saw it on television this morning. I'm not a fan of John Bolton. He's a real sort of a lowlife.
Mr. Bolton arrived back home mid-afternoon. No comment.
Ambassador Bolton, what happened, sir?
And no comment either from the FBI about what they found or what next. Mark Stone, Sky News in Maryland.
The actor and director Noel Clarke has lost his libel claim over sexual misconduct allegations reported by The Guardian. The newspaper published a series of articles featuring claims from several women. Today, the High Court ruled that reporting was substantially true. Our arts and entertainment correspondent Katie Spencer reports.
Firstly, my trainers are ruined.
From Bulletproof to Doctor Who.
I could transport out of here, but it only carries one and I'm not leaving you.
Noel Clarke found himself cancelled overnight when The Guardian published sexual misconduct claims about him. He says he's never claimed to be perfect, but now lost a legal case against the paper with a judge rejecting his claim that accusations against him by more than 20 women were false. Instead, it's been found that Lucy Osborne and Shirin Carley's stories were true and in the public interest.
Certainly he often was in control of sets because he would be a producer, a director and a writer, and that made it very difficult for women to speak up about their experiences because he was ultimately their boss. The allegations against Mr. Clarke ranged from bullying to sexual harassment all the way through to secretly filming naked auditions and unwanted sexual touching.
The times change. People change.
Known for his gritty dramas, the Kidulthood franchise portraying life on the estates he grew up on, Noel Clarke, as an actor, producer and director, has been a hugely influential figure in TV and film. Just a few weeks before The Guardian went to press 4 years ago, he was honoured by BAFTA.
Hopefully people see that I've tried to elicit change in the industry.
That honour prompting a number of women to contact the paper.
His behaviour was so pervasive and it became so normalised in the industry. These kind of behaviours were becoming kind of normal behaviour on his sets, and not enough people were calling it out.
The police found Clarke had no criminal case to answer, and struggling to get work, he sued The Guardian. Now, 18 people came here to the High Court to give accounts of their experiences of working with him.
It was profoundly moving to see our women who had spoken to us for the first article get up there and give evidence.
In court, facing the kind of questioning they did. These women were asked intimate details about their private lives, their sex lives. Some of them were, repeatedly told that they were flirts, liars.
In a statement, Noel Clarke said, "For almost 5 years, I have fought against a powerful media outlet and its extensive legal teams over inaccurate and damaging reporting. These stories started via anonymous emails portraying me as a monster to attract attention and outrage. The goal was to damage my career, and they succeeded. I've never claimed to be perfect, but I'm not the person described in these articles. Overnight, I lost everything. The media outlet didn't just ruin my life, they ripped through my families also." Guardian editor-in-chief Catherine Viner described it as a deserved victory for those women who agreed to testify in the High Court, refusing to be bullied or intimidated. His career in tatters, the judgment now also means Clarke faces a hefty legal bill. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
Some of the day's other stories now, and a number of people have reportedly been killed and dozens have been injured after a tour bus crashed while returning to New York City from Niagara Falls. The driver survived the crash and is cooperating with police, with no other vehicles thought to have been involved. Around 50 passengers were on board in upstate New York, with some still trapped amongst the wreckage.
And our team worked together to provide care for all 24 patients coming in. We currently have 20 of those patients actively receiving treatment, imaging, evaluation by the trauma service in the emergency department, and we likely have updates later. 2 went to I believe, the operating room, and we have several patients who went to the trauma ICU.
The woman who was jailed for stirring racial hatred online after the Southport murders says she is considering legal action. Lucy Connolly was released yesterday, having served 10 months for a social media post in which she called for mass deportations and setting fire to hotels. Mrs. Connolly believes police and the Crown Prosecution Service were dishonest in a statement released after her conviction. We put that to the CPS and Northamptonshire Police. The force say they hope to contact Mrs. Connolly in the coming days. A serving Metropolitan Police officer has been charged with 4 counts of rape. PC Robert Wing will appear before magistrates next week. The alleged offences are said to have taken place between 2013 and 2016 against one person while he was off duty. The Salvadorian man who was mistakenly deported from the US earlier this year before the Trump administration was forced to bring him back has been released from custody. Kilmar Abrego Garcia had been detained on his return to America, and while he was eligible for bail, he stayed in jail because his lawyers were worried the government might try to deport him again. Police have arrested 100 people and seized more than 50 weapons in an effort to prevent serious disruption at this weekend's Notting Hill Carnival. Officers carried out what they called intelligence-led interventions, with 21 people recalled to prison and 11 firearms seized, as well as more than 40 knives. Now, dust scooped up from an asteroid that's 200 million miles away has been found to contain material that is older than our sun. The samples provide a snapshot of the early solar system, and because they didn't have to come through the atmosphere, they are more pristine than any meteorite that's landed here on Earth. Our science correspondent Thomas Moore has been taking a look.
Carefully protected from Earth's atmosphere in a special chamber, these tiny granules contain material older than our sun. They were collected by a spacecraft from the asteroid Bennu, and the first major study of their chemistry shows they contain pre-solar grains. That's matter from dying stars at least 4.6 billion years old.
It sort of really reinforces this idea that we are stardust. So everything that makes up our bodies and our planet originally was formed in stars that were ancestors to our solar system. And we can really see that story inside the Bennu asteroid by looking at these tiny grains that formed even before our solar system.
The sample was collected by NASA's OSIRIS-REx spacecraft that intercepted Bennu while it was 200 million miles from Earth, and scooped up 120 grams of material from its surface, which it brought back for analysis. It's precious because it is a window to the swirling gas and dust that formed not just asteroids, but planets.
Asteroids like Bennu are a time capsule of conditions early in our solar system's history. Meteorites that crash to Earth are contaminated as they come through the atmosphere. But Bennu is pristine, and that's what makes these results so exciting.
Space rocks bombarding the Earth early in its history are thought to have brought water and the ingredients for life, and studying samples helps scientists piece together how Earth came to be habitable. Thomas Moore, Sky News at the Natural History Museum.
Next, it has been 10 years now since the Shoreham air disaster, when a plane taking part in an airshow crashed onto a dual carriageway, killing 11 people and injuring 16 others. The families of some of the victims have told Sky News they are still angry about what happened, and they fear that airshows are still putting people at risk, as Amanda Acas explains.
10 years ago, a vintage fighter jet plummeted down from the sky into one of the busiest roads in Sussex, killing 11 men. Most of them weren't even watching the Shoreham airshow when they were engulfed in the fireball. 23-year-old Jacob Schilt and his friend Matthew Grimston were driving to play in a football match. They never arrived.
It was catastrophic, really, for all of us.
It's obviously just changed our lives forever, and it's a huge reminder every 22nd of August, because it's such a public anniversary. It's destroyed our lives, really.
All this time later, that no one's really accepted accountability.
That does make us very angry.
But not surprised. Because that isn't the nature of institutions.
The 1950s jet came smashing down on this stretch of the A27, a dual carriageway which runs right next to the airfield at Shoreham. The pilot, Andy Hill, who survived, had been trying to fly a loop as part of his display routine, but he wasn't going fast enough and didn't reach enough height to be able to pull out of the manoeuvre safely. A jury at the Old Bailey subsequently found him not guilty of gross negligence manslaughter, although a coroner ruled the 11 men had been unlawfully killed.
The rules around airshows have been tightened up since the crash, with stricter risk assessments, minimum height requirements and checks on pilots. But both Jacob and Matthew's families believe the regulator, the Civil Aviation Authority, still isn't doing enough to protect people using the roads near airshows.
It's quite shocking, really.
It's definitely an afterthought about third parties. We talk about Duxford and how they're still flying low over the M11. That's taken a long time after 2015, if they still haven't done it by now.
Some experts claim the CAA also has questions to answer about their response to a previous incident involving Andy Hill, after the organisers of the 2014 Southport Airshow issued an emergency stop to his display because he flew too low and too close to the crowd. The Air Accident Investigations Branch later found that while the CAA had had an informal discussion with him, no further action was taken and it wasn't reported. Retired pilot Steve Coleman says they had a statutory duty to have done so.
You have to ask the question, if the Southport incident had been investigated, was Shoreham less likely or more likely to have occurred? And I think there can only be one answer.
The CAA told us they did investigate the Southport incident and regulatory action was taken. They insist all the recommendations and safety improvements in the reviews carried out after the Shoreham crash were fully implemented, and that airshows continue to be subject to rigorous oversight to ensure the highest safety standards. But the families of those killed still believe much more should be done. Amanda Acas, Sky News, Shoreham.
Sport now. And England have made a strong start in the Women's Rugby World Cup in front of a record crowd at the Stadium of Light in Sunderland. They won 69-7 against the US in a ruthless display which delighted more than 40,000 ecstatic fans.
As predicted, England's women absolutely dominated against the USA tonight. The final score was 69-7. We were in there for a little while in the Stadium of Light watching the action, and it was just try after try after try for England. The atmosphere there was absolutely electric. There were around 43,000 fans here in Sunderland this evening to watch the action. That is predicted to be the biggest crowd ever for a Women's Rugby World Cup match. And of course, it's only the first match of the tournament. And the fans here very, very excited, as you can hear, and we talked to some of them a little bit earlier.
Amazing stadium, amazing people,
crowd.
amazing. Oh, yeah.
How are you going to celebrate tonight?
She's at work 7 o'clock in the morning.
Oh no!
Got the spoons.
Don't have a cheeky pint anyway.
I was going, oh, absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
Thank you so much for talking.
Bypass all the English, the football women do well and they always get the plaudits, but these have been doing well for years and they're getting out.
I know.
And now it's coming to the fore.
I think it's really good. It shows how far women's sports going nowadays.
Well, England's Red Roses are firm favourites to win the entire tournament. They are #1 in the world, and there will be packed stadiums watching them as they try to pull that off. 375,000 tickets have already been sold across the Women's World Cup. That's double the number for the last World Cup. And the organisers are hoping that this will generate as much excitement for women's rugby as the Lionesses did, of course, when they brought it home last month in the Euros. And judging by the fans tonight and the excitement levels here, that shouldn't be too hard to pull off.
That was Katie Barfield at the Stadium of Light in Sunderland, and that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. As you can see, I've been joined by Guardian columnist Zoe Williams and PR consultant Alex Dean. And in the stories tonight, we'll be discussing this on the front of the Times. Its headline, as you can see there, Farage will pledge 5 deportation flights a day. We'll be right back.
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides and it's. and it's moving this way.
Hello there, you are watching the Press Preview, a first look at what is on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with Guardian columnist Zoe Williams and PR consultant Alex Steen. They'll be here with me until just before midnight. So let's see what is on some of those front pages as they come in. The Mirror's front page is leading on a plea from Holocaust survivors to end the famine in Gaza. The Telegraph leads with Lucy Conley in her first interview given since she was released from prison yesterday after she was jailed for inciting hatred online in the wake of last summer's Southport attacks. The Sun also focuses on that story. Its headline, I was PM's political prisoner for a year. The Eye's front page is focusing on migration and how voter attitudes may be shifting towards it. The Daily Telegraph Express, focuses on events in Ukraine with the headline, 1.6 million children stolen by Putin's war machine. The front page of The Times leads with claims from Reform leader Nigel Farage that he will pledge 5 deportation flights a day if he's elected. The FT leads with the news that the chair of the US Federal Reserve, Jay Powell, is paving the way for a Federal Reserve interest rate cut in September. And the headline on the Daily Mail, Ghislaine, the truth about Duke and Epstein. As I say, tonight joined by Zoe and Alex, so let's get straight to it. Let's, Alex, go to the front page of The Times. Nigel Farage paving the way for his bigger announcement on mass deportations on Tuesday with this interview with The Times today.
5 flights a day of asylum seekers will return, or refugees will be returned to their places of origin, or indeed, as the Times goes in to set out in more detail, other countries. There may be third countries. The Rwanda scheme may be recreated. Albania is entertained as another venue. The Ascension Islands are discussed as a potential fallback under the scheme. All of it meant to be pushing back on increased refugee and asylum seeker presence in the United Kingdom. And the point is, there's a competition between all of the parties now to say to the electorate, we're really serious about this. And this plays to Farage's strengths. It's where he has played well in the public for a very long time. And the argument against Farage by the mainstream parties has been, well, you're not serious about it, you make noise but you haven't got a plan. So here's the flesh on the bones from Farage. And he will drive the weather now. Like, he will determine the political environment yet again, and it'll be the other parties responding to him will be the next piece of the news cycle.
Bearing in mind what you just said about what the other parties will say, the sub-headline on The Times there is Reform leader says £10 billion plan will save money. Well, it just so happens we've had a response to that this evening from Angela Eagle, Labour's Border Security Minister, saying Nigel Farage is simply plucking numbers out of the air, another pie-in-the-sky policy from a party that will say anything for a headline. And it goes on. So your thoughts?
Well, it is interesting. She's probably right, Angela Eagle. If you look at the Rwanda scheme, I think that cost £108 million per asylum seeker, with actually no successful deportations. 4 people went voluntarily. So these schemes never... it's impossible to cost them because there are so many hurdles to doing them. But that, as a response from Labour, the real problem with that is they're yet again going after them on a technicality, rather than making the argument for not derogating from the European Court of Human Rights, making the argument for the Refugee Convention, making the moral argument for the fact that just because the world is in turmoil in a large number of places, that's not the time as a civilised nation to turn your back on it. Now, I completely get that Farage will make the weather on this, but there are huge segments of the electorate who are crying out for a party to say, no, that's not the country we are. And literally nobody's doing that.
So I completely get that you won't like it. And you're right, there are sections that the Guardian readership won't like it, that is correct.
I know, but we're people too.
No, you are, but you are certainly not, and I've said this to you before, you're not Nigel Farage's target audience, right?
No, well,
There is a chunk of the population that will want it, and the Eye's got some polling that increases the salience of migration as an issue in the public mind. But see, Zoe is absolutely right that Labour going after them on technicalities about numbers, it's a category error. I once watched a debate where somebody was advocating return of capital punishment, which is not something I agree with. And his opponent said, yeah, but you'd have to leave the EU to do that. I mean, you just completely missed the principal point on offer here. And that is what... OK, maybe it's 11, maybe it's 9. You're arguing entirely on Farage's turf when you're in that game.
Interestingly, if we are talking technicalities, Angela Eagle's statement goes on, the Labour government has substantially increased returns with 35,000 people removed from the country in the last year alone. But I think the last figures on the number of asylum seekers in hotels ticked up, didn't it? So the technicalities can come straight back at them.
Exactly, and actually, as soon as you start arguing on raw numbers, then you're saying 30,000 asylum seekers currently housed in 200 hotels. If you've got the public and the judicial system saying that's not an acceptable way to house them, then you've got a 30,000 strong problem on your hands. What really, somebody, it's not going to be the Labour Party, obviously it's not going to be the Tories or Reform, somebody has to start arguing for the fact that if you accept the necessity for sanctuary at all, then you need a better system where people can work while they're waiting for their claims to be processed, where they can live decent lives, where they can lay down roots, where they can support themselves. Somebody has to start arguing for that, because at the moment it's a race to the bottom. It's a race to the bottom of humanity.
So a genuine question. Do you think that the new Corbyn-Sultan party will do that?
I would put more faith in the Greens doing it, to be honest, because I think Corbyn and Sultana are already at loggerheads, and I don't have a huge amount of faith in the people who are pulling the strings in that party.
You touched... Well, let's move on very quickly.
Sure.
Well, not on the subject, but certainly in the papers. You mentioned the I Weekend there, Alex, because their headline is voter attitudes to migration toughen as more asylum hotels are targeted. Just beneath that, they say voters' attitudes are hardening as Keir Starmer faces mounting protests over asylum seekers being housed in hotels across Britain. Pollsters have warned. Reform, like the polls right now, they're running high in the polls. This poll plays to their strengths too.
It's absolutely manna from heaven for reform. But I will also point out the irony of the Labour Party, led by a long-standing human rights lawyer, who's argued for ages that the rule of law is supreme. You must defend the courts. It's wrong to impugn the courts. Who now, faced by a court decision they don't like about the Bell Hotel, say democracy must rule. The court's completely wrong. We can basically just ignore it. Now, actually, I think that Labour Party is mad to pin their colours to the mast on an appeal against the Bell Hotel in Epping. It was an interim judgment. It's on a technicality about the right of the owner to change use of the hotel. And instead of just saying, well, rock and roll, guys, because there are plenty of other places that we can try and put people for the interim, the Home Secretary is committed now publicly to appealing this. They've upped the ante. And so they've got nothing to win here anymore. If they keep the hotel as an asylum hotel, they'll lose reputationally. If they lose the decision again, they've lost.
Yeah. I mean, the problem with the hotel situation is that nobody's arguing for hotels, right? The refugee groups aren't into hotels. Everybody wants there to be a better system of humanity and kind of humane
Labour intends to wind it down by the end of the Parliament.
But by 2029, and do they really mean by the end of the Parliament, or are they trying to kick it into the next term?
I can't understand what the government is doing on this, because they do have a good narrative on some of this. So you can no longer come to this country under a visa for a different reason and then switch to asylum or refugee status, right? That's a change the Labour Party made. It would be popular if they championed it. The Conservative Party failed to do it after, drumroll, 14 years, right? That's something they could point to and say...
Why did the Tories not do that?
Very good question, right? But more people do that than come in small boats, right? They come on a visa and then they switch to asylum or refugee status. This government's tried to fix that, and they get no credit for it because they do things like appealing a decision on the hotel.
But again, we're conducting this entire conversation as though everybody... And this, I think, leads back to the headlines about voter attitudes hardening. Every single media conversation is conducted on the basis that small boats are A, the major problem facing this country, B, the major pressure on housing and public services, C, that none of us have any sense of kind of, pride in offering sanctuary to people, D, the idea that all migrants are a drain on the system rather than... And this is ridiculous.
No, I mean, I just said that more people come and switch visa to asylum or refugee than come in small boats.
But we're still acting as though every single person coming to this country is de facto a problem, rather than possibly like the beginning of a beautiful new life.
There is a flip side to that. Do you think that everyone who's protesting outside a hotel is wrong or racist?
Well, I mean, I think that if you go to a hotel and say everybody in this hotel is posing a danger, a public order danger, and a danger to my society and a danger to my family, then yeah, that is racist. Yeah.
Good grief.
Let's move on to an adjacent story, really, because on the front page of The Telegraph, and indeed the front page of The Sun, features a picture, dressed in yellow, of Lucy Connolly. "I was Starmer's political prisoner," is The Telegraph's headline. Similar headline on The Sun, which we'll show in a second. But The Telegraph, and also The Sun cribs from The Telegraph tomorrow, by the way, because it's the interview that Lucy Connolly has done with Alison Pearson that dominates their front page. Let me just read you a couple of excerpts from this. She's described as a much-loved Northampton childminder known as Starmer's political prisoner, says Alison Pearson. Tory councillor's racist wife screamed the headlines at the time. She goes on to describe Lucy Connolly as a hero to millions as well. What do we make of this, Zoe?
I mean, you can tell that interviewing isn't Alison Pearson's main gig, is the first thing I'd make of it, because it makes absolutely no attempt at even the kind of basic diligence of seeming like a neutral and kind of plausible interviewer.
To be fair, I
mean, nobody... When did you last read an interview in which you kind of take on a political figure, and Lucy Connolly is a figure in politics, even, you know, despite the kind of unconventional route there too, and in such hagiographic and frankly saccharine terms.
But isn't that why she got the interview? Because she'd been a champion of her throughout the time of her imprisonment.
No,
so I think that's
they wanted a
why
puff
it came
piece.
about.
I just think it's... I mean, sorry, I'm coming at this like just in a Fleet Street way. I think it's like really stomach churning.
Well, I don't, and I think there is an important discussion to be had here about freedom of speech, and I thought that, broadly speaking, bringing offences in this environment is wrong anyway. I don't think she meant a particular... I don't think she was inciting violence anyway, notwithstanding her pleading guilty and the Court of Appeal upholding her conviction, any more than I didn't think the Labour councillor should have been charged for his throat-slitting gesture.
But you're a recovering barrister, as you...
Well, I respect that she pleaded guilty. You can't...
Yeah, exactly. You can't get somebody off who's pleaded guilty.
No, but you can query. You've still got a right as a society to question charging decisions.
She was calling for an arson attack on human beings.
Alison Pearson describes it as a nasty tweet,
right
up the top.
And it was a nasty tweet. And in much the same way that I wouldn't care to spend time with the chap who drew his finger across his throat and said people should have their throat slit. I wouldn't have charged Ricky Jones, the Labour councillor who was acquitted. So people have compared the cases and said there's two-tier policing in the UK. I don't agree with that. Although there were different bail outcomes as a result of their pleas, but he was charged and he was acquitted, right? So, you know, straightforward...
How did he plead?
He pleaded not guilty, obviously.
OK,
So my point...
She pleaded guilty.
No, but I don't think he should have been charged in the first place. So I was making a point about there is an important discussion to be had about freedom of speech in this country, which is why I was saying I don't just find it saccharine. I might not have chosen the tone that the interviews goes with, but in the end I think it's a very important story.
Yeah, but come on. At what point do you say this calling for humans to harm other humans is illegal? At what point is that wrong?
It was rhetorical. I don't think anyone...
But more to the point and more pertinently, she is described as a formidable enemy that Keir Starmer has made. Do we think there's a case there for that?
I mean...
Potentially, yes. In the same way that unlikely spokespeople arrive because of what's happened to them. The sub-postmasters and so forth became the world's most unlikely thorn in the sides of politicians of different...
Well, no, I don't think those two cases are... you can draw any parallel at all. The whole point about the sub-postmasters is that a massive corporate injustice had been meted out to ordinary people.
What you fail to appreciate is many people think an injustice has been done to her.
No,
the fact that you don't doesn't change that.
No, it does change. It's not just because I don't think it's a huge injustice that it's different. This is a person who pleaded guilty to a charge Come on, Alex, you know exactly what the difference is between all these cases,
No, I'm not
right?
saying it's a perfect analogy.
I mean, there was like
that takes us into a whole other direction.
The question you were asking was,
institutional
could she be a potential formidable foe? And my point was, unlikely people emerge onto the political scene sometimes, not having chosen it, not having sought it, but by dint of what's happened to them.
She certainly has.
And in that respect, she might be.
She certainly has some support. We've discussed the substance of it. I think the saccharine language that you're referring to, Zoe, it might just read people some of it as a flavour. She's described as having a heart-shaped face and liquid chocolate eyes and carrying more weight than she would like after a grim prison diet, Alison Pearson writes in her piece with Lucy Connolly. More to come in a moment, because on the front page of The Express, 1.6 million children are stolen by Putin's war machine. That's their headline. More headlines coming your way after the break.
I want to start the programme today with a name, a story that I can't get out of my head. The campaign has now started. This is your chance. Tell people. This is the Politics Hub. It's not correct. The tax burden is projected to go up.
No, I am talking about...
No, but I'm not. This is my interview. Look, this is ridiculous.
No one does care about us.
I'm really interested in that. On the Politics Hub, we like to push the boundaries. He's got the majority. The question is, what is he going to do with it?
We've come to one of Moscow's Cold War bunkers. It was built as a top-secret command centre.
Being here really feels like you're stepping back in time. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
A show of military might and menace.
Courage, bravery and sacrifice will win the day.
It's a new subject. They'll learn about combat drones and some how to handle a Kalashnikov.
The Kremlin continues to put forward its own version of events, both present and past.
There's no mention of the fact that Russia invaded its neighbour. That's rewriting history, isn't it?
Now we have to read it carefully.
Vladimir Putin put forward his plan for a ceasefire in Ukraine, telling Kiev, pull out of your eastern territories and the war will end. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Vladimir Putin is already the Kremlin's longest-serving leader since Stalin. The question is, what will a fifth Putin term mean for Russia and the world?
Why do you support Vladimir Putin, Mr. Segal?
I can't answer questions that stupid.
I've watched Vladimir Putin attempt to create a new world order.
The St. Petersburg Economic Forum was the backdrop to Vladimir Putin's latest verbal volley that Russia could send missiles to other nations to target the West. Ambassador, I wonder, shall we have a quick word for Sky News? Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine?
Swedish media, oh my God, you're not afraid of being here.
American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display.
Russia says Evan Gershkovich was caught red-handed, but has never produced any evidence to back that up. Sky News. Get the full story first.
Gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos, analysis up at 6%. Podcasts, watching us live. Joins us live. All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's Senior Ireland correspondent. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace. The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland. Catholics and Protestants now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19, religion's nothing.
Sky News, the full story first.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. Zoe and Alex still with me here in the studio. And let's get back to the front pages. And actually, both of you, two of the front pages, namely the Mirror and also the Express, really focus on the miserable plight of children in war zones. The Mirror features a striking image, as you can see there, of a child, Kareem Muammar, who's just 3, suffering malnutrition in a hospital in Khan Yunis in Gaza. Stop Starving Gaza's Kids is their headline as a famine is declared official there. And also The Express, 1.6 million children stolen by Putin's war machine is their headline. Alex, tell us a bit more about that one.
I'm really pleased that the Express is running this, because in all of the discussions we've had about potential settlement between Russia and Ukraine, and there is some improvement in the narrative, European leaders, the Trump-Putin summit, potentially a next peace if the parties can be convinced. This has been the topic that's been explicitly off the table. And so the Trump White House briefed in advance of the Alaska summit that whilst they'll be discussing other areas, this is something they would rely on the parties to sort between themselves. 1.6 million children stolen away from their families, their parents, their communities in Ukraine by dint of Russia's illegal and aggression war in Ukraine. And it seems, I completely understand the desire to get to peace, and it's that attitude, desire is right. But you cannot ignore the fact that, a good chunk of a generation of Ukrainian youth have been stolen by the aggressor.
The thing is, the situations are parallel. The Mirror and the Express headlines, there is a parallel here, which is that all these talks are trying to take place without explicitly saying Netanyahu is responsible for the famine and Putin is responsible for these kidnappings. So you're having, especially with Trump and Putin's bilateral talks at the end of last week, we were literally watching a kind of summit take place in which, Vladimir Putin is not an honest broker. He is not in it to stop suffering. He is in it to create suffering. And exactly the same is happening in Gaza. We have these conversations like, oh, we finally declared a famine, but we're not talking about how this famine is man-made and which man can stop making it. And until we start having that conversation, this is just going to be really, it's just going to foster a sense of impotence.
Russia invaded Ukraine. Clear, good, bad axis. You, on your narrative there, would acquit Hamas from any responsibility at all.
I certainly acquit Hamas from the responsibility of starving Gaza.
You don't think they deliberately starve their population?
I do not think
steal food
that.
from the people of Gaza?
I think Israel shoots people at food distribution points deliberately.
That is an assertion that you... I do.
What? You don't think that's true?
I don't think it's been proven, and I think you saying it as if it's a fact is as bad as you saying that Israel is responsible for starving in Gaza, where Hamas has systematically used food as a weapon.
You have both alighted on one of the most heated debates at the moment, just as we've got 20 seconds left, I'm afraid. So we'll just bring that one to an end for the time being, and maybe we'll pick it up at 11:30, but it's a heated one, no doubt about that. Let's take a very quick look now at the weather then.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
The next few days will be mostly dry with increasingly warm, sunny spells in time for the